Hey everyone, it is April 13th, Directors Network time, second Tuesday of every month. And we've got a couple great speakers on here. We've got Kelly Johnson with JFS Financial. We've got Heidi Bellotti with Mason County Child Care Nurse Consultant Sharing. PCF is on, and then we talk a lot about employment, hiring, and issues with staff with Cheryl Fisher and Dusty and several other directors that jumped in. These director network calls can be so productive, but they be more productive with your participation. So I'm glad you're able to see this on our Facebook, but let's continue to build our conversation, have dialogue, interact. So I hope that you can meet up with us at our next Directors Network meeting. It is the second Tuesday of every month. We really hope that you'll participate so we can grow the conversation, grow the support, grow the dialogue. All right, guys, here we go. Welcome.
Clientele that can help benefit your organization in terms of growth as well as financial sustainability. The first of the three is the Employer Retention Tax Credit. Okay, I'm going to say that again. It's called the Employer Retention Tax Credit. And this is related specifically to you business owners that have employed other individuals in the form of an actual employee, not a subcontractor, and retain them on staff through the entire COVID process, or have retained them to some capacity over it. So I understand most of your facilities either had to reduce census or had other opportunities that wouldn't allow or permit full staffing. However, the government has come up with some really cool programs to allow for you to get reimbursed part of the payroll taxes that you've paid on retaining those employees. So ultimately what this means for you is that the credits are allowed based off of your growth performance of your organization quarter over quarter. So if I were in your shoes, I would either work with your accountant or your payroll company provider, depending on who is servicing you from that perspective. Or if you're flying solo and wearing that hat as well, you would run your profit and loss statement month or quarter by quarter, comparing 2020 to 2019 and 2021 to 2020. So ultimately, you're comparing each quarter to the prior year quarter. If you can show in 2020 to 2019 comparison greater than a 25% loss in revenue, you could go back and recoup up to $5,000 per employee per year in employer tax credits against Social Security taxes. So it's offsetting Social Security tax specifically. If for 2020 compared to 2021, the threshold drops even to, last year it's 25%, this year it's 50% beneficial. And so you run the numbers and determine if you're eligible. If you've already ran payroll and you're like, wait a second, I've already paid those taxes, you would work with your payroll provider to get reimbursed or file amended payroll 941 documents to get that Social Security money back. And what we're seeing is in that process of doing that, the money is either applied to your future 941 or payroll tax payment, or you might actually get a check. I just had a client in your guys' industry receive a check for 2020 in terms of those credits. So it's a performance-based measure in terms of how well you're doing. There's lots of really cool resources out there. If you are not familiar with like the Business Incubator or SBDC and you're unfamiliar with the whole profit and loss process, there is also, they will help you go through your numbers if you need free consulting to be able to leverage and figure out if you're eligible for that credit. But again, when you're talking about retaining employees and paying payroll tax, I don't know about you all, but like payroll is my highest expense as a fellow business owner. And so if there's any way to help save you money, that is one of the lower hanging fruit opportunities for you. And what I will do, Kirk, is I will provide you with my little cheat sheet you can send out to this group after I'm complete with the actual percentages of like the measurement. I created a little bullet point list to just talk about eligibility. So that way, if I was dyslexic and said the inappropriate percentages per year, you guys have the accurate information from that. So that's one of the really big ones. And we're seeing it from my perspective. We work a lot with clients on determining eligibility. we did see quite a few people qualify for that credit. That's part one. Part two is dependent care credit benefits. Now, this does not have a direct impact on you personally as business owners in this industry. However, when you're talking to parents of children that are coming to your organization, this is a great selling point because in 2021, the dependent care credit that individuals get on their tax return for paying for childcare has gone up, meaning they get more of that money back as a credit on their personal tax return. And I don't know about you, but I'm always trying to find a way to sell our services from a value-based proposal. And so from my perspective, a lot of times people choose to not put their children in childcare because of the cost versus the benefit of them working. But if they're able to deduct it on their taxes, it becomes a really cool point for you guys. So again, it's not directly attributable to you guys from that perspective, but it can be a great way to increase growth if you are looking to grow your organization from the number of children you're bringing in. The third major opportunity is the PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program. There was a lot of talk and heat about this back in 2020. However, they have extended it through May 31st of 2021, meaning you can still apply for PPP round 1 and round 2. So if you received the first round of funding in 2020, you have the opportunity to apply for it round 2 in 2021 if you haven't already done so. Now, there are requirements in terms of if you're going for the second round, you have to show that you did have a decrease in gross receipts, very similar to the employer retention credit, around that 25% decrease, to be able to be eligible for that second round of PPP. However, if you did not get the first round, and you're looking for funding support in terms of your business and the COVID impacts that it's had, you don't have to meet that requirement and you can still get the PPP funds. So again, super beneficial program, and the Fed and our state, Colorado specifically, have said that the expenses that are utilized by the PPP are not, you can still deduct them, meaning the PPP becomes a non-taxable based amount of funds that you're getting. Same with that ERTC. Other states are not seeing that nice forgiveness aspect. Like we have a lot of clients in California, it's taxable there, things like that. So that's one of the really cool benefits in Colorado, that it's a deductible expense, meaning by default the income is not taxable to you. So ultimately, from a federal perspective, those are the three major things that are going on right now in terms of individual-based funding from an employee and payroll perspective. Now, there are a bunch of other really cool grant programs, though, that are coming down the pike that I highly encourage you guys to watch for. So there's been funding sources, and it just literally escaped my brain, through the Grand Junction Chamber. A lot of the chambers, they're facilitating, and I just want to say Enterprise Zone, and it's only because I was just doing credits for that. But if you go to the Grand Junction Chamber's website, there are business grants and loans that you can get, and the grant program that they just are getting funded for, you can apply and receive some additional funding. The one thing to caveat to the City of Grand Junction Chamber, as well as even the incubator grants, those grants are taxable income, so make sure you're working with your tax preparer or consultant to make sure you have a strategy to not get hit with taxes later on those. But the incubator as well as the chamber has some really cool programs that they're working on. Now, we're not talking huge grants, but if you're trying to do a very specific program, I anticipate that you can, communicate that program to those specific organizations, and they will provide funding. I sit on the board for one of them, and we just approved some applications for people just trying to grow their business or get back on track as part of getting our economy squared away after everything we just went through. Another really cool thing to also consider in terms of grants and funding sources is there's a lot of additional, thank you whoever just put that, Jessica, for putting that in the chat box. The grant application is actually in the chat for you. Again, these grant opportunities are coming down a lot more quickly than I anticipated. The government, Colorado government has also just distributed funds to our local government, so from a city level perspective and county level. It has not been 100% decided on those funds, but we're talking they just distributed over $11 million to our local area in terms of additional funding. We do anticipate some of that coming back into economic regrowth and grants. So really pay attention to those websites. What I would recommend from your guys' perspective is just get on their emailing list, because oftentimes in their newsletters, they'll offer links to those applications. But those are the big ones that we're really seeing. I know there's a lot of regulatory environment stuff that's coming down the pipe, but ultimately the goal was for organizations that are at the governmental entity level to be able to get the funds back for economic stability and growth. So really look at those websites and links. The applications have not been complex. I did help a couple of our current clients in that process, so I don't anticipate you having to give like your blood type and firstborn and all the fun stuff that usually comes with a grant application, but rather stuff to help you organize and get your organization back on track. The biggest thing I can say with grants that I wanted to share and make sure we were in alignment is that when you apply for grants, I always tell people to make sure it's in alignment with programs they're already doing. So there's a lot of grants that are going to be coming out that I anticipate seeing relating to food-based reimbursement and other different components of your industry. If it's not something you're already doing, oftentimes the complexity of maintaining the grant and being able to use the funds for what it's requiring is not worth it. So anytime I look for grant applications, I try to make sure they're in alignment with programs I'm already offering or that the client is offering, so that way you don't have to redo your business processes just to meet grant requirements, because oftentimes the cost will start to outweigh any benefit that those grants produce. So really watch that piece. And then the last thing I'll share, because I know, Kirk, I have a small timeline, but I want to make sure I get you guys all your information, is the SBDC through Region 10. So if you go to Region 10's website, yes, it is not Business Incubator local, but Region 10 is affiliated with Bright Futures in the SBDC network. We have actually launched a cash flow, tax, and income online class you can take for childhood education and development centers. And it ultimately walks you through how to know your numbers in terms of increasing cash flow, how to handle the payer mix of dealing with CCAP and private pay reimbursement and all of the fun items that you guys get to deal with in your industry. But it also helps coach and train around cash flow, so that way these grant programs and benefits that you're getting are in alignment with your long-term goals. Because there's some really great programs out there, but again, if it's not part of your 5-year plan to have loans or debt on your books, you really want to watch what programs you enroll yourself into in terms of that piece of that process. And I know Bright Futures got on board with this particular program, and it now is considered continued professional education. So I don't know what your requirements are in regards to that, but it can be part of that. So if you go to Region 10's website, it's one of the classes on there, and they'll get you the right information and connect to the right person. But the course equates to about 5 hours of content. The videos are only 5 minutes long each, though, because I know how busy you all are. So you can piecemeal out and work on it over a period of 6 to 12 weeks. But also, it's a really good resource that we've been leveraging and helping grow profitability in our child care centers as well. So with that fire hose treatment that I just gave you, I am complete, but I'll make sure Kirk gets the bullet point list of mine that he can send out to you guys in terms of the programs I talked about. Thank you, Kirk.
Thanks, Kelly. And then I'll put a link to that information that Kelly's going to provide to me right into our agenda. So that'll live inside the agenda for this meeting, so you can always reach back and grab that. So, hey, Kelly, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking your time on April 13th to visit with us. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for all of that information. That's awesome. Thank you.
Anytime. I love seeing businesses thorough. So Kirk knows this. If you guys have any future questions or whatnot, feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for here locally. So thank you.
Yeah, and Kelly is definitely, as she mentioned, the childcare is a piece that's near and dear to her, near and dear to her, and and she has some other things that she does with regards to some childcare that I'm still learning about. So anyway, it was a great partnership for me and for Discovery, and she's been huge in helping me free up some of my time so I can focus on the business and let her do what she does, which is my books a lot better than I ever could have imagined me doing them. So anyway, thanks again, Kelly. Appreciate you. All right. Well, Miss Heidi, let's hand the mic over to you. And I know you had some things about child obesity grants and maybe a couple other topics. You're welcome to share whatever you like.
So part of what funds my position at Mesa County Public Health is a early childhood obesity prevention grant. And a lot of what I do with that grant is trying to educate child cares about getting kids active in child care, as well as breastfeeding promotion. Um, it has obviously been a little bit of a challenge to do some of that in-person education this last year. Hooray. So part of what I've been trying to figure out is how can I utilize resources we already have that are online and help promote those in our community here in Mesa County. So you may have gotten an email through last week about Let's Get Kids Moving. And there is a great Let's Get Moving physical activity in early care and learning class on PBIS. I really encourage people to take that class. It's a great refresher class. It's only an hour long, so it's not a huge time commitment compared to some of the other movement classes. I know I Am Moving, I Am Learning is 3 hours, and that is also a great class. It is just a big time commitment. And then there's an infant toddler piece of that class that is another hour on top of that. And this is a great class because it's online, it's at your own pace, and it is only an hour long, and it also touches on infant toddlers. And I know there are teachers who are just in preschool, and there are teachers who are just in infant toddler, but this is kind of nice because it gives that kind of overview, and you can kind of take those pieces and apply it to your classroom. And so if you take this training, you can submit your certificate from that training. And then I kind of just have a brief assessment afterwards, which is part of being on grant, is you kind of have to take assessments from people who participate in that grant. And it's kind of an assessment of where you guys at your site, how active are you kids, are they getting outside, are you doing teacher-led activities, and then a little bit about food at the site as well. And then there's one piece which is kind of like, if you could pick one thing kind of from this training to apply at your site, what would you do and how would you make those changes? So just kind of a quality improvement little piece there. It's a great little training to do. I also have information there about an I Am Moving, I Am Learning class that is being held by Healthy Childcare Colorado if someone does want to do the longer class with more hours. And I will, of course, if you want to do that training and submit that registration, that is great with me. And then if you guys do that, I have this great little 3-in-1 carnival set I can get out to you guys so that you guys can use this at your site. And then if you're working with a younger age group, because this is obviously not the best for like a 1.5-year-old to play with, we also have some scarf kits that we can get for the younger age groups so that they have something a little more appropriate to play with. And we don't have an unlimited supply of these, but we do have a pretty good supply, so I'd really encourage you, if you want to do that, go ahead and do it and get on it and get that information submitted. We'll send out more reminder emails about this this coming week. That's really just, about getting those kids active, getting them moving. We do know that kids will, they'll get outside and then they'll just sit and dig underneath the, slide and not actually be up and moving and being active. So we do want the kids to be up and moving and actually, building their cardiac capacity, learning how to use their big muscles as well as their small muscles, and getting that energy out because it does help them with their behavioral issues as well and with their self-regulation. So we want to encourage everyone to have the tools to use. Another part of that grant is the breastfeeding promotion grant. Part of what we want is we would like all of our child care centers and homes to have a breastfeeding policy in place. I know pretty much everyone has a policy around breast milk and how they store it. This needs to go a little bit beyond that from our perspective, where we want ideas in place about how are we going to support moms who are breastfeeding so that they can breastfeed at the site if they need to. And then how are we going to support our own staff if they need to breastfeed or pump while they are at the site, so that we are fully supporting those children and those moms who need to breastfeed, as well as, that breast milk piece needs to be in there as well. But I review a lot of policies and it's just like, we're good with breast milk. And it's like, we need to go a step beyond that. That's just pretty basic right now. That's licensing. And we want to go a step above that so that we can be a little more supportive of moms. There is also a really, really wonderful training on PDIS around that. That is called Supporting Breastfeeding Mothers in Childcare, or Breastfeeding in Childcare. It's a 1-hour class. It's a really great course. For me as a nurse who worked in pediatrics, it was an amazing little review course that goes over kids going through growth spurts, breastfeeding strikes, just a lot of different areas of breastfeeding that can help you know some basic knowledge to support moms. So especially if you have infants, this is a training I really, really encourage having in your infant classroom curriculum for your teachers. So when they're doing their orientation to infant rooms, include this training in it, because this training is really well set up on PDIS, as well as getting a policy in place. We're also going to send out kind of a similar thing. It will be a Google form where we'll ask you to submit your policy, as well as a teacher certificate from your infant room. And then we have this very cute little nursing Nina. It's a little stuffed cat that has little kittens that are magnetic that attach. And then we have also breastfeeding books. One of them is called Mama's Milk, and it has some little different animals, and it talks about breastfeeding there, so you can educate kids about breastfeeding, which can be really helpful if you have a child who's going to have a new sibling come up, and just normalize that for them, since their new sibling is going to spend a lot of time at mama's breast, so they learn about that. Any questions about those things? Any other questions for me?
I just want to say that when we had our infant room open most recently in Junction, I feel like I kind of dove back into some of the partnerships with parents and breastfeeding and communication, and my little takeaway was once I felt like we kind of had a program, part of our curriculum was breastfeeding, and activities and that communication, education with families. It just felt like such a great partnership when that dialogue was flowing between staff and moms. It just felt like that was that really, really critical piece for our program that was great having in place. So I encourage you, if you have that infant program, even without, you have families that are having a new child, and so that child may be at home or in a home care provider, still making that information available. I think this is great.
And part of what we want to do with this is be sure we get resources into your guys' hands, so you guys know, what are the free resources out there you can give to your providers. There are lactation consultants through St. Mary's and through Community Hospital, and if they had their child through either of those, they can contact back to those lactation consultants at any time and get help if they are struggling, and reach out to them about what to do, and figure out, if they are having trouble, what next steps to take. Do they need to call and talk to their doctor if they're having too much pain? Is it something like mastitis they need to get taken care of, or is it just a latching issue? And, you know, getting them in contact with the right people, as well as you guys just being a support and letting them know, you know, sometimes it's hard, but, you know, you guys are there for them. So it's very helpful having the child cares on board with the process.
Episode 1 intro to this vlog. I'm going to start this time. Okay? Oh, all right, child care home.
Well, thanks so much, Heidi. Can I hit you up for a couple more questions, Heidi? What beyond the obesity grant, and clearly that drives some of your focus. You've got to focus on and satisfy the objectives of that grant. What other types of services? How else do you spend your time with child care providers of Mesa County? And the following question is, can we utilize you in other ways besides our one topic on the obesity grant and things that might be encompassed in there?
Yeah, of course. There's been kind of a weird year this last year, so it's figuring out what exactly is going on, because I have been pulled pretty heavily into the COVID response and doing testing, and then stuff with the vaccination site. But things I've still been doing are working with providers around medication administration. Typically with centers, they have a specific nurse that they work with, to usually their health consultant, and I am a health consultant for some sites. Typically it's the Early Head Start sites, because one of my grants is through Early Head Start that I am providing care. So I do that specifically with those sites. But then I also am very, open to teaching that class, but they will have to do the delegation piece through their own nurse. But that class is also available online right now. So that is where a lot of people are getting their medication administration class. There is an in-person piece of that is something that I will do with any home. Because we know home providers don't contract with health consultants. And so for home providers, if they need that second piece of that class that's in person, we'll get set up so I can meet with them and do that in person part of it. Thankfully with home providers, they only need that once every 3 years, so it's not overly demanding for them to have that happen. And then also for home providers, as they're going through the Colorado Shines rating, we can have a documented agreement so that they, basically have documentation that they know how to communicate with me if they have things that come up, so that we have kind of a brief nurse consultation agreement with that home care provider to help them achieve, basically get some points for their Colorado Shines rating, which, honestly, it's a little bit of a formality, because if we have any home call me with a question, I am going to respond to their question and be there for them. And that's basically true with centers as well. If I get a call from a center, I will try to find answers for them with any health-related question also. Part of what is going on right now with COVID is there's just a lot of COVID questions that come up from centers, along with case investigations, and I have been working with our EPI team for making sure that we are doing that and contact tracing appropriately. And that's just kind of time consuming right now. So yeah, I'm trying to think through some of the other things. Before, standard precautions was something I would teach. That again is online on PDIS, and once COVID happened, it was like, you're gonna take it online because we're not doing in-person classes right now. And so that's something we might take back to doing an in-person class every once in a while after COVID, because it is nice to have that interaction and that time for questions every once in a while. And it is nice for people to be able to ask those and be in person. There are some people where that in-person learning just does work a little bit better. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other areas, and I feel like there's a few, but it's just been so much COVID this last 12 months that it's just like, wait, yeah.
Yeah, clearly understand why you were taken away, as everything that you just mentioned is, health related, medical, training related, supporting centers and homes. Yeah, great.
Yeah, yeah. And then I know, right now, I don't know that I can specifically, I got a question about nurses. I refer to be consultants. I do know that Roxanne Calderon has, I believe, is retiring soon. And so one of the other gals who does this is Robin Winfrey. And I'm going to share her email with you guys. So she is another nurse. I really love Robin, and she works with a lot of the other centers, after school programs and camps. And she's, because she isn't pulled by so much grant funding to have to do different things, like she's a lot more flexible than I am with what she is able to do and provide for different centers. So she is a great resource to have in the community. She's worked as a school nurse for a while, and she's done this job for a really long time. So she is another great resource to have, and I think the world of Robin. And I'm sad to see Roxanne retiring, but I mean, she's been doing this for a long time too, and isn't that the dream, to be doing what you enjoy for a long time and then retire and get to enjoy life? So that's great. Yes, so, yeah. Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate it.
all right,
Yeah, an open invitation to come on anytime and chat.
all right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you all.
Well, let's pass it on over to Miss Amy and Jessica with PCF. What do you have for us, ladies?
Hi, hope everyone's doing well. We don't have too many updates, just some kind of continuations of some things we shared last month. The big one is expanding an emerging grant, which I shared a little bit about last month. That's the grant where if you're increasing capacity, you're eligible to apply from anywhere between $3,500 and $50,000. And it's a pretty flexible grant, really whatever is needed to support that increase in capacity. We have been working on putting together a webinar for that, because as the grant just started in February and it's a pretty new thing, there's kind of a lot of confusion around the process and the different people involved and the steps and sequences that have to be taken. So we are working on putting that webinar together, and hopefully in the next few weeks we will be sharing that. But if you're interested, please reach out to me, and we can start talking about it. This might be a good fit for you. The grant's available until June 2022, so there's no huge rush, but like all funds, they could run out someday. So definitely, if that's something you're thinking about, I would connect with me and licensing sooner rather than later to start discussing that. The other thing, is there a question?
I had a question. So the pre-qualifications for the Expanding Emerging Grant, is one of them an MOU for rating with Shines? Is that...
So you are required to sign an MOU with PCF, the Early Childhood Council, but it's not an MOU for Colorado Shines, which is one piece of the confusion. You are required to get to a level 2 in Colorado Shines within 18 months of being approved for this grant, but
Yeah.
the level 2, isn't going through the rating, but rather getting those things done within the system. So that's one requirement to sign that MOU, and that MOU really just kind of dictates the terms of how the council will be kind of facilitating the process of getting the grant to providers. You are required, though, to have a CCAP agreement and indicate acceptance of CCAP students. And then
Yeah, so your answer to that is encouraging because thinking of a new center that's on here now, opening up, the idea of wanting to open up a center and, you have to remodel or redesign the infant toddler program, yet going, like committing right now, hey, I'm going to go through the Shines rating 3 through 5 would be, I would probably advise against it if you're just opening your doors, but to sign an MOU with PCF to get to a level 2, which level 1 is licensing, level 2 is getting your staff on board, taking some classes, which you need anyway. That sounds fantastic. And then partnering with you guys, obviously CCAP is going to be typically involved in all of Mesa County. So,
one helpful clarifying point too that we figured out too. If you are thinking about this, or you've already begun the process of opening a center, any cost associated with opening the center, starting with January 1st, because that's when the legislation was passed, those are approvable costs on a reimbursement basis. So, it's really great to see such flexible and available funding for this. And I encourage you to explore it and chat with me if it's something you're interested in. Any other questions about expanding and emerging?
anyone else?
Great. The other thing I just wanted to make sure that's on everybody's radar is the PDG Universal Inclusion and Design application. It is open now, and I believe there might even be some people on this call who participated in the last cohort. But basically, this is a program, a grant for getting access to low-tech materials for inclusion for your students, and it works on, there's a lending library, and I believe it's been pretty successful in the first year that they've done it, and they're hoping to expand it and broaden it. So if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, I just linked the link for that.
Awesome. And 2 quick things from me. I think probably every meeting for the last 10, we've talked about the provider town halls, that support group on Tuesday nights. And that's beginning to wrap up. But as an alternate resource, there's a free teacher-educator well-being support line through the University of Colorado Anschutz campus. And so you can call or text in and talk to a trained crisis counselor volunteer, talk through stress or, there's plenty to go around right now. Talk through the changing circumstances, frustrations, they're there for that. So I can link the flyer in the chat. And then one other thing that's coming up soon is a free CPR and first aid training. The date is probably May 1st. It hasn't been nailed down quite yet, but as soon as it is, Jessica will obviously share that out in her Friday emails. So, yeah, that is on its way and in collaboration with Public Health.
Sounds great. Does anybody have any other questions or feedback for PCF? All right. Ladies, thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right, Miss Cheryl Fisher, you ready? So a couple were jumped on. If you jumped on in the beginning of the meeting, Cheryl and I were just talking about employment and some of the challenges, and some of these challenges are new challenges, kind of bred out of COVID. All this stuff with good intention, but there's pros and cons to everything, and so as employers, the workforce it's changing, and the culture in the workforce is changing, which is kind of what Cheryl and I were talking about earlier. So one of the questions we had was, how do we as employers take back control over that relationship? We talked about appreciation. For some of you that didn't catch it, we talked about mugging your employees. We strongly recommend that now that we all have a better definition of that. And that was appreciation that came in the form of a coffee mug that got passed around. But before we dive, does anybody else have any? Okay, so one topic in conversation can be, how do we take back control as employers? Does anybody else have an employment question or struggle that they've dealt with that maybe is unique or not unique to these times of employment and attracting employees and so forth? Does anybody have anything they want to share on that topic, or share a struggle they might have? All right, so
Why not
go ahead.
shares like Little Blossoms and Peaches and Cami, because, and even you probably have a lot more full-time staff than what I do with my before and after school programs.
Yeah.
So mine are college students, the majority of my staff. It's what I have found even this year, and it began last year, was just even the buy-in from their parents, that they have a job. And I don't know if you guys run into that with younger staff members, even college age, that commitment and how they're being, I guess how they're being raised. Because I was raised that you take on a job, you do the job.
Right.
You're at work, and you're at work come hell or high water, basically. And it's just a different mindset of this incoming working generation, that there's so many other things that can draw them away from their job. And it kind of attributes to, the programs that you're doing, Amy, or the town halls on Tuesday night is, the stress factors that are up on everybody in the workforce, not just in childcare, but everybody in the workforce right now, and managing that stress and that. So I'm trying to find a middle ground to where understanding that there's stress with balancing a personal life, a business life, a work life, all of that good stuff, but still making that accountability prevalent in their, I guess, and giving them a margin that, yeah, I know that this week is really a busy week, but we still need to carry on, delve through it. So that's just something that I'm struggling with, is parents not making their children really understand that commitment that they're making. They're as young adults.
Yeah, and so let's say that all or most of us might agree with that. So if the parents aren't instilling that work ethic and commitment and accountability, then I guess we have to, right? And so we try to do that by, as we talked about, showing appreciation, training, teaching accountability. One of my recent closers lately, one of my closing supervisors out here in Fruita, her name is Ellie. And she took on and created a whole new atmosphere with her closing staff. So we use Voxer, V-O-X-E-R. It's an app that we use to communicate. I know Stephanie at We Care a Lot uses Crew, and I think Little Blossoms uses that as well. And so she created a group chat where, like on Monday, she'd come out with Motivational Monday, and she would have a motivational, poem or something on there, and then she would just give a shout out to somebody. And then she would have, she had clever names for them, but she'd have, Friday was something else, and Wednesday was something, and then she would give shout outs once a week to a different staff member. And all of a sudden, the culture in that closing crew and the communication, as well as the accountability, started really to form. So this is what she did to create culture among and accountability and that teamwork among maybe there was 6 to 8 staff that were involved, kind of in that 4 to 6 shift Monday through Friday. And for the most part, we saw less call-offs. We saw better communication, and some of that accountability, Cheryl, that you're talking about, that we're all looking for. So oftentimes it's one of us as owners on the call that are mentoring, and sometimes that comes in the form of discipline, with our staff, and going, hey, no, you can't, or here's a consequence, that type of thing. But I mean, I think in many roles, not whether it's our staff or whether it's our families in our care, we become a parenting figure for them. Again, back to the point you said, Cheryl, about in some cases, maybe many cases, it feels like parents have let go of that teaching responsibility. I can tell you as a parent of 4, 3 that have already left the house and 1 that's turning 15 next week, I thought it would be easier these days to teach the kind of accountability, respect, and responsibility like my parents did. I don't remember being that difficult kid. I'm sure that I was, but it's interesting, and I think it's a cultural thing that, maybe it's technology, or maybe it's just the social media that is so important to them these days. And so we could complain about all that, but the reality is if we recognize it and we figure, okay, how do we combat that? How do we create a culture that they want to come to work? How do we get these young adults to want to come to work, to want to be a part of that team? Maybe we just got to figure out what's missing, which is that culture and appreciation that may not be seen elsewhere, and that is a safe place for them to come. So I'm going to pass the mic to someone to pick it up here. How do you feel that we can be connecting with our staff more in ways to create that accountability teaming? What are you doing? What kind of things do you put into your center that you found to work, or that you're like, well, I'm trying this tomorrow, and you're hopeful for?
So I know that for me that has also kind of been a struggle. Sorry, I have a little dude I'm feeding, so I'm sorry about the noises. But I know that we have really struggled with that because it's really, really difficult. And I think another thing that we struggle with is that fine line between being a friend and being a boss, because I feel like when I try to create really positive things, then sometimes I lose some of that, I don't want to say respect factor, I guess, more sometimes I just feel like my girls are like, oh, it's just Dusty, she's, she's so sweet. And it's yeah, but there, comes a point where it's I don't want to be viewed as that person either. And so I know, we try to do, things, where we'll bring in donuts or, pastries from the bakery, once a month, or, just something little just to show, hey, I appreciate you guys being here, but I also would be interested if anybody has anything on how to create that kind of environment that I think we all want. but sometimes it's hard to achieve that, because I feel like when I get really laid back with everybody and try to create an environment I think people want to be in, they sometimes then don't respect it as like a work environment so much anymore. So that's a balance I've had a really hard time with.
That's definitely a hard balance to keep. It absolutely is. But kind of just in how they still are looking at you in a respectful and a leadership way, if you can bring in that, and you can still be, I don't know, but it's a fine line, and you learn that through experience, I think, years, really, and what that line is, and each staff member is different. That's what I have found, is that, I can have some that just respond really well to different things that I do and some that don't. So I just have to find that unique relationship with each staff member. But you're right, that line is pretty hard to find, but you'll establish it. You've been doing this a while. You'll get more experience under your belt, and you'll be fine. Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Janet Little Peaches. Hey, one thing that I did, because I did nursing for 20 years, and one thing that helped is effective communication. And so I took a assertiveness training. And so there's different ways that you can speak to people in different tones and different passive aggressive. And maybe we could see if we could get some kind of communication class going, just to effectively communicate and make sure that they're hearing us too. I think sometimes they listen, but they don't hear what we're saying. Like Desi said, because I work with all of my family, and so sometimes my 27-year-old daughter and I bump heads, and so it's just taking that step back and remembering my boss hat, my friend hat, my mom hat, and letting them know the difference. Look, I'm not being the B word. This is what has to be done. This is, this is the boss hat. And so now I'm speaking to you in this tone to let you know that this needs to get done, or this needs to get solved. So I think an effective communication class would be beneficial too. I think I would retake it again for sure.
I don't think you need to be ashamed about being the B word. I think being brave is amazing. And you are brave, Miss Jen. You are so brave.
Yes, and I'm bold too.
Bold, that was the other B word I was looking for. It's balance. We were talking about that. Sherry, you start off. I don't have any friends where I work. I don't have any friends. I do have family. Whether you got hired on yesterday or a decade ago, you're part of my family, and that's how for me mentally I try to disassociate from staff as friends, and really think of it as family. So for me, that helps me with my balance. I don't know what you have to do to put it in perspective for yourself, but and I let them know that, like, we don't want to let down our family. Friends come and go, but families, they stick together. So for me, mentally and visually, it helps me keep in that balance. And sometimes I treat staff like children, because sometimes our staff act like children. But yeah, it's really tough, especially, if you hire a director that's been in the ranks among co-teachers for 3 years, and now they come in as a supervisor, and they have these really tight, hard, bonded friendships in the classrooms. That becomes really hard for them. It's almost a what's the word? Disadvantage that they have as a supervisor. And so if you're going out on the weekends or going out on Friday night with your staff, or you're talking about relationships, and outside of where we're there to support them, right? We have staff that come in, they're crying, they need to get through a process. But if we kind of hold to that mother and father role as opposed to that friend role. I don't know. That to me is how I try to find that balance in there, because once we step over the line as friends, it becomes really hard. And I take that back. I have one friend at the center, and they're dear friend. They've been dear friends of my wife and I for 13 years since she's worked for us. But at that level, we have such a professionalism. It's not an issue. So.
It's
Well-
really our job to teach people how to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes at all levels. And I have to remind myself of that a lot.
Yeah.
Because, and this is probably one of the first years, well, not one of the first years, but where I've had a lot of incoming 19 and 20-year-olds that have not yet had jobs. Yeah, they've done babysitting, or, they've worked down the street at the grocery store for their buddy, but this is like their first official job. And so it's really important that I have to keep that part in mind as I'm trying to teach them that they might not know how they need to be dependable, and that they need to learn how to manage school and work and a personal life, and just helping that reminder. And so I'm like Kurt, I very much feel like I'm a mom about 99% of the time with these staff members. And I try to touch base with them on a weekly basis, at least, with every one of my staff. What's going on? How can I help you? Is there something that, I can help manage? Hey, I've got some extra staff on Wednesday. How's school going? Would you like Wednesday off? To where you can kind of balance that too, in taking an interest in their personal life without being involved in it. To where you're helping them learn how to manage, to where you're not taking that stress on, but you're helping them learn how to manage that stress. And how can you help them do that? To where you've got some interest in their personal life, but you've got that boundary too, to where it's not all consuming for you.
We all have boundaries with our parents, right? Like, we'll tell them some things, but we don't tell them everything.
Right, right.
And maybe it was your mom or your father that you were like, okay, I'm going to watch this line because I felt that on my rump. My dad spanked me twice. That's all it took. First time was like, ouch. Second time was like, I get it.
Yep.
I get it. No disrespecting the
Well,
mom.
and I read a neat thing from Love and Logic, not even just 2 weeks ago, that